Okay, so what I'll do now is I'll just quickly walk through what we have in this soantribe-ui project. The Ember CLI gives us these tests here, which I haven't actually spent much time working with at the minute, but I will definitely get into that. But the really interesting bit is this app directory, where we have all of the parts that make up the app. So we have components, we've got controllers. The controllers are sort of not very interesting because Ember really does a lot of the stuff for us. I have this search controller here which has a lot of stuff in it. The gist of this is that at this point here we're calling into this .search, which actually does the search, and then when it comes back we have this promise comes back, so we can call .vin, and we can say set properties with the results, and we can say loading is false. Then we have these other controllers, not too interesting at all. Helpers are basically either handlebars helpers or just standard helpers that are used throughout the code. So this one here is a handlebars helper, and it gives us a bound avatar. At the minute it's hard coded, but I will obviously fix that up so that it's not hard coded. But what this will end up doing is if you're showing an avatar within the app and the user changes the avatar, because this is bound, the avatar will automatically update. The other thing that you might notice here is that we're using this import and export sort of language. This is because we're using the new ES6 syntax for HTML script 6. So the way we're doing that is because we're using Ember CLI. Ember CLI will automatically use a transpiler to change our ES6 syntax into traditional JavaScript, but obviously the advantage is when ES6 goes live, we will already be talking ES6, so we won't have to do any changes, which is quite nice. You don't have to worry about any of it, just make sure that you're sort of using this syntax and it's all good. There's not a hell of a lot to it, it's just slightly different. So we've got this other helper here, which just exports a function, which formats a string, and then we have this icon helper here, which these are used throughout the code. Initializers. So initializers are where you can obviously hook into the boot process of your app, and you can initialize certain parts of it. One of the things that we do is we have this user model, which is obviously very, very simple. We just define a user model, but later on throughout the app, I want to be able to say user.current, and we'll get the currently logged in user. So this goes back to when we were talking about the preload store stuff earlier. Ember has a thing called reopening a class, whereby you can add to a class, kind of like extend it after the point it's been created. So in C# they're called extension methods, but really it's just you can add static methods to a class after the point. And so in the user reopen initializer, I am adding this create current method, and I'm also giving it the singleton mixin. A mixin is it just adds functionality again to the class, but just does it in a different way. So if I look at this singleton mixin quickly, you can see that the mixin adds current and create current methods. Ignore these for now, but the current one is the interesting one, because what it'll do is it'll say if the singleton doesn't have an instance to pass back, then it'll call create current, and if we obviously go into the user reopen class, it's going to call create current here, and then we're going to go off to the preload store and fetch that JSON that was downloaded with the app when it first came down, and if there is a current user logged in, then we're going to return that current user as a Ember record, as an Ember model. Otherwise we return null, so we obviously know that the user isn't logged in. So we have lots of various different mix-ins. We have the search one, which again, if you go back to the controllers and we look at the search, you can see here that we're using this .search, and that is because we've extended the Ember controller and we've added the event search mix-in. So we can say this .search, and looking at this you can see that we We create a promise by calling Ajax. This uses the Ajax mixin, by the way, which I can go through later. But so because it happens asynchronously, it returns a promise, and then when that promise is completed, we then do this little bit of work here where we group up the results and we return the data in the shape that we want to use it later on. Quickly, the Ajax mixin. Here, this just kind of adds to the standard jQuery mixin, jQuery Ajax stuff, but the really interesting part is down here. Where are we? Where we're using debounce to to fetch the actual data. Now I need to fix this up so that it uses it properly, because debounce will add the Ajax queries to the Ember run loop, and the Ember run loop basically manages the stack of things that need to happen. So you add it to a queue, and Ember will execute them eventually and return the promise. But what Ember will do is it will see, if you tapped in GLASTO real quick, it will batch them all up and it will only send Glasto. So you don't have to worry too much about sort of throttling things and stuff like that. So that's quite handy, but I just need to get that working. So then we have the roots. Again, these are all just there out of ceremony. They don't really do anything at the minute. Roots in Ember are very easy to confuse with controllers in any other MVC framework. And I haven't really got my head around that, but really you can put actions on a root, and boom, you've got controller actions on a root, and you can also initialize the model and stuff to be passed to the template here as well. But we'll get to that later. Styles, obviously, where all the SCSS stuff is stored. This has all been pulled directly from Discourse. One of the things I had to do was change some of the syntax slightly, because Discourse uses the Ruby SCSS pipeline, and we're using obviously the Ember CLI one, and the syntax was slightly different, but there's no major changes there. Then we have the templates, which are the handlebars templates. We have the application, where we're saying, render the outlet, but also render the header. So if we're going to look at the header here, we've got, this is mainly, almost mostly ripped from Discourse, but I've just simplified it quite a lot, just so that I only have the code that I need for what I'm trying to do. What we have here is obviously these links here are for the icons. This one here is for search, this one here is for the map drop down, and this one here is for the user drop down. And then down here we're rendering the search, the site map, and the user drop down. These are all hidden by default using CSS, so when the app loads up, let's have a quick look. I need to get rid of this here again. When the app loads up, we don't see anything, it's only when you select it there, so that's all cool. And again, the way that we do that is we have these views. So on the search view, on the header view, I have this show drop down action here that will hide and show the drop down. We also have this examine doc header stuff, and what that does is on here, if I scroll down, let's have a look at one of these. On here, if I scroll up, you can see that the header is no longer docked. Now it's docked, not docked. That takes care of that, but that again is something I need to wire up and test. And that's pretty much it. We have these roots here. These roots they have dynamic segments, so that we can pass in the user ID, the event ID, and the artist ID. And what happens here is the reason why when I go to when I go to search for something and I select, so now if I refresh, we're going to get a blank page, and the reason for that is while the app's alive, we're passing the model in. So if I look at the search result types and go to event, I'm passing the actual model in when it generates the link. That's all good while the app's up and running, but when you refresh, the model doesn't exist anymore, so you get a blank page. And the way that you deal with that is in here, before anything happens, you have a model here, and this will fetch the model and pass it to the view. So when you refresh, that URL still works. But the main thing to notice with all of this as well is one of the really good bits about Ember is if you're navigating around the site, you'll notice that the URL changes. At the moment we're using IDs, but I will swap that over so that we're using slugs. But what the gist of that is that you'll be able to copy that URL into Twitter, Facebook, whatever, email, and send it off, and the URL will work, and the app will behave like a normal website. And that is pretty much it. Really, you just need to sort of go through the code. A lot of it, sort of like this singleton stuff, you know, the Ajax and debounce stuff might be a bit confusing, but the structure is, you know, very simple. You know, we have this search here where we're doing the actual grouping of the search results here. So what we're doing is we're going through each of the result types and we're outputting the name, and then we're calling into this view where we have search result types. And what search result types does is it formats the template name here. So we're saying that the template name is you know, event user artist dash result dash type, and that then gets resolved to one of these result types here. And the really cool thing about this is that we can format the search result for each type. So you know, you can have, you know, a different style of search result for a user, you know, maybe with their avatar and some other, like, you know, information about the user, whereas on the event you can have, you know, the profile image for the event. You can have some, you know, blurb about the event, or you can have, you know, the number of users attending and this sort of stuff. So the search results can be customizable per type. You know, they all look the same at the minute, but you can actually completely alter that. And that is really it. There's not a hell of a lot to it. But what I'll do now is I'll just keep tweaking it and tidying up some of the bits. Maybe put the header in, and maybe put some more stuff down here. Maybe add in like a really basic lineup viewer.